it's a whole different type of game, and you're competing against other companies who have most of the time more resources, like these bigger companies that you're competing against if you're a startup.
Mm-hmm.
Like work around them. How do you differentiate yourself? It's way more creative thinking than I think our at least our education system in Trinidad kind of like
Mm-hmm.
didn't prepare us for, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then the things that you take for granted in a company as someone who comes from a technical background, they matter a lot more than your technical
Yeah.
product. You know,
Wait, can you tell us
marketing.
some of them? I'm
Yeah,
curious
yeah,
for my
yeah.
own learning.
Yeah, so so like marketing, understanding your customer, getting to know their day to day, how to reach out to them, what's the form of communication that they empathize to most, they relate to most, how to sort of add pizzazz
Mm-hmm.
to your product, how to differentiate yourself in a way that is memorable. Like
Mm-hmm.
all these small little things when put together make a really good.
So in today's episode, we have a conversation with Arjun Mohammed. So Arjun is currently a software developer at Microsoft, and this episode fun in particular because he's sort of the first software engineering, computer science person that we have on this podcast. So we got to look at a lot of topics such as what it's like working in a big tech company like Microsoft. We talk about what are sort of pros and cons of working in big tech and also how to get into a company like Microsoft. He's been there for 2 years now, so we also do a little bit of reflection on what he's learned and how that is informing his decision of what to do next. Um, we also get into some topics such as large language models and AI and how those impact his job, sort of how they could impact students and how to adapt as a student such that a student and an individual, such that you can continue to thrive in a world where large language models will continue to become more accessible and used by more and more people. We also talk about his team winning Hack MIT a couple of years ago and what that experience was like and how that impacted his sort of immediate career journey and his advice on doing hackathons and sort of in general his advice on doing startups and what he's learned through trying to do his own tech startups. I think this episode is particularly interesting because there are so many tech and software engineers out there, but this is story about someone who came from a background where you're told to again do become a doctor, lawyer, or engineer, and he sort of took this sort of different approach with sort of non-traditional approach in his background, and so he learns a lot along the way, and we discuss what his learning process was like and also some of the challenges that he faced in getting to where he is today. So yeah, hope you like it. Hey Arjun, welcome to this episode of the podcast. Super excited to have you here today. For a while I've wanted to talk to you about sort of all the things you've done. So maybe we can just start with Microsoft. So you currently work at Microsoft. Can you tell us a little bit more about what your role is, what you...
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, so yeah, really excited to do this podcast. Yeah, let's jump right into Microsoft. So I've been working here just over 2 years now. I've joined the cloud security organization. So we deal with securing third-party clouds as well as Azure. So we're not completely tied to Microsoft. We help customers in like GCP, which is like Google's cloud platform, and we also help in Amazon Web Services, and then also third-party services like GitHub, GitLab, like anything that a company needs to secure their code from beginning to end and deploying it. In that role, I've worked on sort of a backend developer role, which is building scalable architecture to ingest customer, information and scan these for problems. So it's a lot of reliability, scalability, and getting customers trust for the data that we pull because, we're another point of failure. And yeah, just recently got promoted about 6, 7 months ago to software engineer 2. So it's been going pretty well so far. And I would say I've learned a lot in this last 2 years. Uh, Yeah. Any specific questions you want to go into at Microsoft?
Okay, so congrats on the promotion. I guess two things. You talked about backend and
Yeah.
level two, and I guess those are two things that we can get into. So, and the general thing that you are is a software engineer,
Yes.
right?
Software engineer. Yeah.
Software engineer. Okay. Um, so maybe first tell us what is software engineering.
Yeah. So software engineering is the creation, developing, and the maintenance, the entire life cycle, of software as a solution to a specific problem, whether it's to build a platform or to build a specific tool or to connect people through technology. Anything that deals with the ideation, creation, maintenance, security of software will come into this paradigm of software engineering. And my role, specifically backend, is the stuff that end users don't immediately interact with. So you interact with most users interact with a web interface or something on the browser, and then that sends requests to something you don't see, maybe the servers in the back. And that's what we build to make sure that those requests are handled well, handled securely, handled efficiently.
Got it. Got it. So I guess, why did you pick like sort of back end over front end?
Yeah, yeah. So in web development specifically, there's two main sides of a coin. Like you said, front end and back end. Front end is what the users directly interface with, so UI, UX, and then back end is the server side. For me specifically, I went into back end because that's first of all what I was more exposed to during university, and it was more closer to algorithmic and mathematical thinking, which I was more leaning towards anyways from high
Mm-hmm.
school and what I was exposed to. So I liked the solve a problem in a specific way given these constraints. And the creative part, I feel like there's more, at least in my experience, creative problems to be solved in that sense on the
Mm-hmm.
back end. And then there's also the ideas of scale and throughput and reliability. Like there's a lot more big problems to solve. But yeah, I'm not trying to take away anything from front end.
Yeah.
Like there would be nothing without it.
Ah,
But yeah, personally, I was just leaning towards back end from the very beginning.
got it. You talk about thought as you pick this, you thought there were more interesting mathematical problems to solve. But
Yeah.
one thing that often happens when people pick careers is that there's a disconnect between, what you think it is versus reality. And in my experience, so many of these things that sound so cool, the day to day is just debugging.
Yeah, yeah.
In any sense, not just software sense, but like something isn't
Mhm,
working, you're
mhm.
trying to fix it. And I wonder how much of what's the ratio of solving cool problems versus just maintaining things, making sure they work, and
Yeah, yeah,
debugging.
yeah. So I think that really differs by company and by level. So in my first, I want to say 7 to 8 months at Microsoft, I was very much heads down, solving problems, like given a task by like a tech lead or my manager, and just get to execute because that's all they care about, at your initial level. Like how well can you go unsupervised with a fairly straightforward problem and execute it at a very high level.
Mm-hmm.
But as you grow more and you start seeing the bigger pictures, you're solving these sort of technical problems less and less, and you're dealing with the realities of a bigger business and process flow. How do you influence others? How do you drive clarity between teams? How do you agree on the requirements? How do you meet customer demands and deadlines? So it's a lot more of the business organization and project management, and those matter way more than a 5% increase in performance in the long term. That's like the harsh reality. So it doesn't matter how great of a coder you are if you can't convince others of a solution that works better, or you can't convince others you don't have authority over specifically why
Mm-hmm.
your solution works, or to understand why your own solution doesn't work. It's those soft skills that we sort of gloss over a lot
Yeah.
become super, important as you move up and as you start interacting with a bigger chain of people.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that because as I've switched to a tech company also, I've been a much smaller one. I've been noticing this myself, and someone who was hired to do technical things, I I look at this. So maybe we can talk about this leveling system that you have.
Yeah.
But I look at the similar leveling system, and I wonder, especially coming from like a research heavy
Mm-hmm.
background where you move up in academia if you're a better researcher, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
you get the postdoc, you get the professor, and nothing has to do. It's sad, but it's nothing has to do with how well you can teach to become a professor at a strong research university. But in this case, you get hired for your technical skills, but the better researcher you are, or the better software engineer you are, has sort of is no longer about your software engineering skills. And I guess it seems I've been wondering if that's the right system, but it seems like you think it is, in the sense that your ability to impact the company, it really starts to depend on these other sort of like what we've been calling soft skills. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think you need to contextualize it a lot too.
Mhm.
For example, these people skills and soft skills and process management matters way more because
Mhm.
I work at Microsoft versus if I
Mhm.
worked at a startup.
Mhm.
If I worked at a startup, I think execution would matter way more to my
Mhm.
managers because
Mhm.
there's less people to collaborate with, less bottlenecks, whereas it's a lot of it is in my own hands. So if I'm a rock star executioner in terms of code and
Yeah.
pumping out lines of code and getting components built, like that matters way more than I'm writing less code but I'm explaining it more. Because at a startup, nobody wants to know too much about the like the nitty gritty stuff. They want to just get stuff delivered. They want to show to the investors. They want to get
Yeah.
to the next step what they promised. But at Microsoft, where there is no rush for funding, there's no
Uh
rush
huh.
for hard deadlines in a sense that we need money or something like that. It's more
Yeah.
about how do you collaborate and reduce friction among all these massive organizations, which are basically the size of massive companies.
Yeah.
How do
Yeah.
you integrate to things that you don't even know exist around the company? How
Yeah.
do you explore? Because of working at Microsoft, you need to level in this way that soft skills are immensely more impactful than writing
Mhm.
really great code.
Mhm. So wait, so can you tell us more about this leveling system and how? So I guess any type of system in this like leveling or like a ladder, people naturally want to move up because it's somehow correlated with pay. Is it correlated with pay?
Yeah, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. So how universal is this, and what does the general, maybe not life cycle? What? Yeah. Can you give me a picture of how you would move up in levels? How many levels are there? What stage of your career can you or should you be hoping to be at a certain level?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll generalize a bit outside of Microsoft. So each company will have their sort of specific criteria that they want to look at for performance. So for Microsoft, it's impact. That's like everything. It's how do you impact customers? How do you impact developers around you? How do you make their lives easier? How do you reuse work instead of building new work? These are things that matters to a big company. At other companies, it might just be how much revenue you're bringing in with the stuff that you build, and so on. So there are like different criteria based on the size of the company, the culture of the company, the products of the company. Um, and then outside of that, now you'll have I want to say the three big titles like software engineer two, and then senior software engineer. Those are where I want to say 90% of the population is in one of those three.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a lot of title inflation at startups because they want to make you feel like you're moving up in this, smaller space. And there's not a lot of consistency across startups for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in these bigger companies, there's a clear idea of okay, if someone's a software engineer too, or someone's a senior engineer, you kind of know it's more reliable what their skill is like.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot more consistency in a systematic way of leveling in these much bigger companies.
Right.
And then as you move up, you need more buy-ins. So for my promotion from software engineer 1 to software engineer 2, it just needed to go to my manager's manager. That was as high as it needed to go. And a
Mm-hmm.
couple of my colleagues needed to buy in. To agree that I am working at this level, there's a clear role definition of what I should be doing. I
Mm-hmm.
don't need as much hand-holding. I can work with ambiguity, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But as you go higher, you need buy-ins from other senior engineers, people outside of your organization, to show that you're working, on a lot wider scope. And then to allude to your point that yes, it is tied to your compensation, so it is very much like something to push towards. But as you go higher up, it's diminishing returns in a lot of companies because the increased responsibility is not worth the increased compensation as you get to the senior level and higher for the most part. And I think that's why senior is a very like terminal state for a lot of engineers. It's a good work-life balance to
Oh my God.
compensation. Yeah, it's a great. I mean, like terminal in the sense of like there is not a lot of motivation to push higher, to
Got it.
principal or staff or whatever the title is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That actually leads me to kind of two questions I wanted to ask. I wanted to sort of get an idea of how cushy Microsoft is in terms of like perks, right? Like everyone, at least I
Hmm.
think most people have heard about how great it is to work at Google, and in the sense that you go into the office and or like Facebook as massage parlors and all these pantries with snacks and
Yeah,
chefs
yeah,
and
yeah.
all these things. And so that's one aspect, like the cushy part. And then I guess with Facebook, this was more of a thing where when they started the mass layoffs and there was this idea, I guess all of this is speculation because I don't work at Facebook, but I heard that there was attitude that most people were coasting. And as you said, like there's sort of at Microsoft, there's no rush to get investors or customers, right? And this idea of diminishing return and terminal state. So I kind of wonder how all of this fits together. So maybe tell me a little bit about like how nice it is, or if it is nice working at Microsoft, because I don't know that much about Microsoft. None of my friends there will be like, oh, come, our office is great. We can bring in people and things
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And then about the sort of coasting, is that somewhat true? Do you see it? How long can you coast? That type of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a lot of science to coasting. It varies from company to company. It's about how well like you establish yourself and the kind of projects you work on. Although Microsoft doesn't need money, there is a lot of spaces within Microsoft where it is cutthroat. Specifically in Azure, for example, which is
Mhm.
our cloud offering to compete with AWS and GCP. Like in those critical business endeavors where millions of customers rely on it daily, it's going to be, on call is going to be hectic. There's not a lot of coasting going on in orgs like that. But then there are the established products. For example, if you look at Microsoft Word or something, or like PowerPoint, like there's not a lot of revolutionary features coming out every couple of months. It's a lot of maintain and
Uh-huh.
support older versions and support newer versions and do the cleanup stuff. So it's a lot easier to sort of, as they say, rest and vest, which is,
Yeah, I've heard that before. Wait,
yeah.
maybe you should explain that.
Yeah, so a lot of your compensation as a software engineer is tied to, at least in these bigger companies, is tied to the stocks in the company. So you're granted a bunch of stocks when you first join, and then they vest over a cycle. So, for example, say you're given 100 shares of Microsoft, and then you get 25% of it each year. So you're just waiting for your next vest to get that next big lump sum of shares that you can then sell or
Mm-hmm.
hold if you think the company is gonna go up.
Mm-hmm.
So you're just trying to, hold on to your next vest and then,
Yeah.
job switch or, continue resting and vesting.
Right.
Yeah. I do want to say that the cushiness of Google and Facebook, I think, is a bit overhyped because
Okay.
they do have a very high bar. Like promotions at those companies are much harder. They have very strict like performance reviews. There is a culture of very strong engineering excellence globally within the company. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft operates as very different organizations. So the style of code I write would be completely different to a team like neighboring to me because we sort of control our practices individually. So the experience from one org to another is basically like different companies. The leveling and system and impact is similar, but your day to day can be very different because we don't have this global, code excellence and this sort of global culture. It's too
Mm-hmm.
big of a company and too many different types of products, I want to say.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Google and Facebook they use monoliths of code and they can verify it. And then day to
Wait,
day at
what is a
Microsoft.
monolith of code? What?
So
Sorry.
yeah, so a
My
monolith is
vocabulary is very limited. Actually.
just one massive repository, for example, instead of
Okay.
having each team control their smaller repositories.
Got it.
So these are like
Okay.
monorepos, which is just one, like all your code is combined into one CI/CD platform, which allows a lot of control, a lot of verification, a lot of automatic style checking and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of variation within the company. You can switch teams and the code style is very similar. You
Yeah.
can pick up much faster, but in Microsoft it's do whatever you need to do at your level. There is
Right.
some basic verifiable checks, and then your team can build their own culture.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, then that actually is a good transition into how hard is it to get into Microsoft? What did you have to do? How did you prepare? Did you apply to Microsoft, Facebook, Google, like
Hmm.
the FANG? Maybe we
Yeah,
should explain what FANG is. Maybe
yeah.
you
So
explain it. You know it better.
So
Yeah.
FANG is these giant tech corporations that add value to your resume, and they are a good place to work in terms of compensation, the types of skills you will learn. I do think they will quickly burn you out, but they are a good thing to have in your resume. I think even up to now, it's similar to the saying that like you don't need a degree to work for a lot of times, but similar to you don't need FANG in your resume to get a good job, but it's not. It's a a really good bonus to have. And FANG
Yeah.
is Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. Microsoft actually isn't on there because FANG was
Oh.
a stock acronym for these high earning stocks, I think in the 2010s.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, now there's, I want to say it's Microsoft, Meta, Apple, Amazon, still Netflix, Google, and there are a couple other like really big ones.
Got it.
Now, like Adobe and whatnot. And then how to get into these big companies. So for me, I'm coming from a CS undergrad, like a strong math and CS undergrad in a like top North American university. So I'm already at like a privileged point to like answer this question. It's very different. If you're coming from a non-CS degree, you're gonna have a much different path and maybe a much more difficult time getting into FANG. For me, I started in computer engineering. I switched to sort of computer science and statistics, and then did a bunch of internships through Waterloo's program. And this is where like there's a lot of make or break at this point. There's a lot of pressure on you as a student to try to get good internships and have a fairly good GPA, especially if you're in a better university, because you don't need to stand out as much in terms of GPA. The university name is already doing a lot of lifting there for you. And then when you have that experience at a good internship, it makes it easier to apply and get noticed and filtered out of these because these companies get probably hundreds, thousands of applications every year for their limited spots. And then once you get the interview, it's landing the interview, preparing for the interview, and leaving a really good impression at the interview. Because the interview is just a long, I'm sorry, the internship is just a long interview of
Mm-hmm.
whether they want to give you a full-time offer or not. And that last internship I had at Google really opened up the doors to FANG for me. So I worked at startups before, kind of learned a lot, got my hands dirty on a lot of different aspects working on those startups. And then that last internship at Google got me a return offer at Google and got me noticed at the other big companies. So I got interviews at Microsoft, at Facebook, a couple other smaller companies, and
Mm-hmm.
then it's a lot of preparing for the interviews.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to go into your preparation for the interviews, or?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Just so
preparation for
people
the
can have an
interviews.
idea about how, like, oh, you don't just do well an internship or whatever, but like you actually need
Yeah,
to prep
yeah,
and
you need
like
to.
what that actually looks like from
Yeah,
a
yeah.
successful candidate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so for prepping for an interview, it's a lot of algorithmic questions. So algorithms and data structures, which is the way like you store and handle data efficiently and manipulate data in these sort of well-known algorithms. And then they
Mm-hmm.
will obviously spin it in like a creative way that you need to apply it. So it's really like a parallel to high-level critical math problems where like differentiation or integration or some like similar process, and then you're given a word problem where you need to break it apart and realize, oh, this is the rate of change of something, so this means I should differentiate. Or you're given clues in a complex word problem. And then the one other part of preparation is knowing how to explain yourself. Because if you can write really code, but you're not coachable or you're not able to explain yourself, then you're not that useful as a software engineer. Because you're going to have an audience at different technical levels. You're going to have an audience who doesn't need to know the underlying details. They just need to know the ins, the outs, and the bottlenecks. So if you're not able to explain those things at a high level, at a low level to your peers, that's not as useful to a company. They need to know that you're coachable, you can explain what you're doing, and they can understand your thought process.
Mm-hmm.
Especially as an intern, you need to be coachable. So
Mm-hmm.
as the interview is going on, you need to be able to pick up clues, build.
Oh, I see. I see. Definitely, I was not coachable based on the interview that I did. Did not get the clue at all. Okay, but yeah, let's get into more of like how many interviews how many interviews do you do um
Yeah,
to
so
until
for
it's guaranteed?
mhm. For different companies, it's a bit different, but it's usually like an online assessment, which is like a take-home exam that you do now. They'll send you like a link. You get like an hour to an hour and a half, usually 2 to 3 problems. Very similar to those problems you'll do in an interview, sometimes a bit more in depth because you can Google stuff. Now you can use like ChatGPT or some other LLM to help, and then you submit that. They will sometimes it's automatic where they just look at test cases and give you an interview, or sometimes a human will really look at your code and see what you did. And then after that, you usually have a screening interview. So you'll have a call with like an HR person, a recruiter, to sort of see what you're looking for, what positions they have open, whether you're a fit in that sense. And then after that, you'll have usually one more technical interview with the software engineer as a screening before they go onto the on-site. So this is probably 1 or 2 algorithm questions. And then once that's good and you pass that, then you go to the on-site. So the on-site can be anywhere from 3 to 5 back-to-back interviews, each of
In
them
one
being
day?
45 minutes. Yeah, usually on
Okay.
one day. Yeah, so I had all 4 of mine on one day, 45 minutes back to back to back. There was 3 technical ones and one sort of culture and how would you sort of scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Given this conflict, or you need to break this news, or how do you prioritize tasks? And those things get more complex as you move up, of course. So this was me interviewing for entry level position. So there was not too high expectations for those sort of soft skill interviews, but as you go up the chain, they become more and more important, especially in a company like Fang, where,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, you need that people management skills. And then the first 3 technical interviews, 2 of them were algorithm interviews, and the third one was a system design. So this is where they don't really care too much about the nitty-gritty of the code. They want to know how would you put things together and orchestrate a full platform or a full system. Do
Mm-hmm.
you understand scale? Do you understand user behavior? Are you thinking, a bit outside the box
Mm-hmm.
to really build your system robust in a way that will be easy to maintain, and all those things you don't think about as a student. I want to say, you're just trying to pass the test cases as a student to get
Yeah.
your marks.
Yeah.
But in the real world, you need to consider that users will use this in a weird way. They might try to abuse your system. They will try to gamify a lot of things. How do you
Mm-hmm.
plan for that? How do you provide optimal value,
Mm-hmm.
reliability, so on.
Interesting. How many people get through all of the interview processes, get to the on-site, get all the questions correct, and still don't get offer?
For Microsoft, I think it's very, very high that once you pass that on-site, you will
Yeah.
get an offer.
Okay.
And different companies, they have different ways to match you with a team. So Microsoft actually recently changed from interviewing for a role to interviewing for like a role as in a specific place in an organization. So if my
Mm-hmm.
team needed a person, they would make a posting, and then you would interview for this specific role in our team.
Got it.
But they recently changed to a generic where we interview for a software engineer too. If you
Yeah.
pass the interviews, you go into a pool, and then our team choose from the pool. So that's
Got it.
how like Google and Meta does it,
Yeah.
Facebook does it, where you have a team matching process after the entire on-site, and you pass, then
Yeah.
you're put into this big pool, and it's like you have mini interviews now with it's not technical in
Mm-hmm.
like a very rigorous sense. They want to
Mm-hmm.
know like your technical experience, but it's more of, are you like find value in our team? Do you want to work on this kind of project? There are cases where they can't find a team for you, and then it
Mm-hmm.
expires, and then you don't have an offer.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to say more likely than not, if you're not too picky, you will
Mm-hmm.
find a role and get an offer.
Okay. Sweet. Okay, let's start to zoom out of Microsoft. Let's get into like why you picked big tech versus small tech. I don't know, is
Hmm.
small tech the right word to use?
Yeah,
But
I would
yeah.
say like small to medium tech. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, obviously this was an intentional decision. You didn't accidentally end up at Microsoft.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
and someone who's good enough to go to Microsoft and to have the other return offers you had, has many other options, right? You have
Mm-hmm.
access to do many other things. So I'm curious, what was that sort of decision-making process like when you picked not Microsoft, but just like big versus small to medium? What are
Mm-hmm.
the trade-offs going to each?
Um, so for I want to break it down into different aspects of my life
Okay.
anytime.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing was remote. I really wanted remote to begin with because that allows you to do things outside of work and it prevents commute time. And I think you're more efficient if you're able to be disciplined and actually work from home or, work from a cafe or something. That was one really big thing. And Microsoft was very much into flexible work and, being really open to remote even now where they're still one of the only big companies where they're fully remote if you want to be, compared to like Amazon, Apple, even Google that require you 3 days in office. So that's one really big thing that I kind of liked about Microsoft. But you can find similar remote jobs in smaller companies. The second thing was making lasting impact on my resume. Anything I'd go to afterwards, like I'll have this kind of like stamp of, like reliability or whatever from this big company. Like I've done this before. I can go back to a big company. I understand the ropes of like these massive corporations. So it's like a really good early checkbox, if you want to say that I've hit. May not be the best in terms of learning. Like you probably would learn more at a startup, but they would also work you harder. And then at the time, compensation was a big one. Like getting paid in like Microsoft stock was doing pretty well. It's a big company. They were with my competing offers, they were able to go higher and stuff like that. So compensation is obviously a big one. Can't ignore that. And then it's also sort of coasting, quote unquote, which is like the ability to explore like remote as well, the ability to explore other asset avenues of income or ways to spend your time. If you don't want to like only work a 9 to 5 like for uh, perpetuity. You want to explore whether it's like real estate, trying or your own business, any sort of other business ventures. This gives you like the ability to do that. And I think it's much more sustainable to do that in a bigger company for the most part than in a startup where you might be needed at any time because there's not many people who are responsible for your code. Like the code I work on, there's 7 other engineers who can kind of hop in and hop out and be competent to solve anything. But at a startup, it might just be you or someone else that can jump in and out and solve something critical. So it's something to be aware of. Yes, you will learn more, but you're more likely to be much more responsible for the things you build. So given all those factors, and then also I wanted to work in Austin, Texas at the time because my wife got a job there. Yeah, Microsoft turned out to be the best option.
Got it. So to touch on the compensation aspect,
Hmm.
there is this sort of, there's always this risk reward balance. And
Yeah.
going to a smaller company, it's higher risk because the company might just get eaten by Microsoft or Google. um, but there's also the potential for higher reward, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
your startup takes
Hmm.
off
Hmm.
or something like that. And you were talking about the ability to somewhat coast, but I mean, just be more efficient and use your time for other
Yeah. Yeah.
things, and explore other sort of income strategies. And I know this is something you have done where you have used this time to create your own startups or small companies. So I kind of wanted to start a transition into how you were able to um, create these companies. And maybe first let's start with what did you do in terms of what startups you created? And maybe also, I think it'd be interesting to define what a startup is because it's a term that's commonly used just in tech
Yeah. Yeah.
world, but I think it's not necessarily a well-defined term for other people. So yeah.
Yeah. I want to say a startup is just a very small employee-wise tech company where their solution is, whether it's a technology solution for consumers or more and more common these days, it's a technology solution for other businesses. That's where a lot of startups are heading towards, where you target these mega corporations as a customer or other software companies or other big companies as a customer. And I want to say you can call a company a startup until they have like very strong yearly revenue and they are profitable for the most part, or they have like guaranteed revenue and a guaranteed market share in a broader sense. And then for what I've been working on, so a lot of these ideas came up because of being in a good friend group at university of like-minded people who don't want to, kind of be tied to these like golden handcuffs, as we call them,
Mm-hmm.
of this really great work-life balance, this good, really good compensation, but it kind of, you know, it's killing your creativity and killing your motivation to do anything outside. So like being around people like that is super important to keep you on track because it's easy to get lost in the day to day and just get into this routine. Clock in, clock out, go hiking, go to the gym, and then that's it. You do the next thing, the same thing tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so being around people like that was a big plus, and also being around other professionals in other spaces. I think when you're too close to tech, you kind of lose track of like there's real world problems that might be need solving, and there's a lot of inefficiencies in spaces that you aren't aware of. So being close to professionals in other spaces is really good, and having a diverse friend group in terms of career and sectors in the workplace. So that's how we started these two companies. One is called Allo Health, and one is InstaPM. And Allo Health deals with electronic survey or questionnaire delivery to patients. So from like a medical clinic or a hospital, for example, you can send out this electronic delivery of surveys, have them complete them, and we will automatically ask for updates and text them or whatever, and then compile these into nice graphs and stats for the practitioner or the clinician. And then the second one is a bit more very domain specific, so surveys are a bit easier to understand. The second one is to do with something called Insta Product Monograph or Insta PM. And the product monograph is a specific type of document that a drug company in Canada submits to Health Canada for approval. So it's one part of a big submission, and this document details things like the chemical makeup, what it was based on, the clinical trials that were done, the ingredients, how to store it, how to manufacture it, stuff like that. And this document needs to be in a very specific format. And Health Canada recently changed that format from an unstructured Microsoft Word to a structured format, and we just help facilitate that change from the old unstructured way to the new structured way. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and very, very, very domain specific, but it allows us to know our customers immediately. That's the
Mm-hmm.
benefit of being super niche. Is like you have this group of customers, easy to market to them, easy to find them,
Mm-hmm.
and then this is a mandatory change from a regulatory company, a regulatory agent, so they need your product in some
Yeah.
sense.
How did you? I guess this is a more general question, but
Hmm.
in this case, it's like you discovered this need, which I think you said knowing professionals in other spaces helps you sort of be aware of these problems, and then you can find this
Yeah, yeah.
opportunity. But I want to dig in more into what is the process of seeing a problem, coming up with a solution, and also knowing sort of at what stage is this solution a profitable solution? How do I turn this into a company?
Hmm.
So I guess maybe we can start with that. Like, what stage do I know that I should dedicate time to making this a monetizable solution, and how do you go about doing it?
Yeah, yeah. I think this is something that I'm still learning a lot, and it's something that I don't think you ever perfect. Sometimes you get lucky and the market is right, and you just get like timing is on your side. Where you don't do any market research, you think it's a good idea, and everyone's ready for it. Or you could have a great product, it provides real value, but your customers aren't ready to pay for it. And, these are things outside of your control for the most part. But there are things that you can do to give yourself a better chance of success. One thing is really limit scope. I want to say, I think a lot of products are too big to begin and require too much investment. You want to find what's like your MVP and your MLP. So your MVP is what you need to get this off the ground, and your MLP is your minimum likable product, which is something that a customer will actually pay for, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But to get off the ground, you just need bare bones features, something that provides the idea that you had in mind. And then you need some sort of validation. You need a loop. whether it's
Mm-hmm.
like a connection in the field you're trying to sell to get their advice, what's good, what's bad, or it could be, learning about that field yourself, so doing a deep dive on whatever it is you're trying to sell to and understand their day to day, really try to empathize with your customer base. Um, and then sort of counter to that point is don't let your customers always say everything too. One of my co-founders always like whenever we asked for someone's advice and they gave us to it, one thing he would always say is like, remember, like if you asked the people who had horses what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. Like they wouldn't
Yeah.
have said a car. That's like
Yeah.
it's completely out of their imagination at that point. It's up to you to innovate and bring something new to the table. So it's also not only thinking about the customer's wanted solution, but understanding their problems at a really, really both a high level and a really low level to know like they just want to get to places faster in this case. They really couldn't care less about the horse itself. They just needed
Yeah.
to get places faster. So really understanding the problem and getting market validation, I think that's what you want to do before sinking hundreds of hours into this is before you even start coding anything, get an idea, get someone who you're trying to sell to validate it, and then try to get them either as like a development partner or someone to sync with often, so you don't lose track. And then I think it's fine to sort of sync hours and build something that's minimal and get people using it. Real user feedback is more valuable than anything else when
Mm-hmm.
you're a startup
Mm-hmm.
because they're the one going to be paying for it. It doesn't matter how shiny you think it looks. It's about how valuable it is to the customer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really hard for an employee, like someone who's perpetually been an employee to get to. Like, for personally, I found it really hard. Like, I thought this was like engineering marvel. Like, I built such a really nice, shiny ingestion system or whatever, but no customer cares about that. They
Yeah.
just want to see that it works. They
Right.
want to, oh, why is this, edge case not working? That annoys me so much. You really need to get it into the hands and focus on what they care about.
So I guess one of the you said you're still learning, and
Hmm.
one process that you've described is sort of the learning by trial and error and through
Yeah,
experience.
yeah.
But where else are you trying to learn these strategies from? Do you have books or like podcasts or I don't know, people sort of mentors that are helping you?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What does one go about trying to learn how to start their own company?
Yeah, there are a lot of books about selling software and selling in general. I think his name is Chris Voss for negotiations. That was a really good
Oh,
book.
the FBI guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's Chris Voss. Yeah, negotiations and how to speak to customers. Those that was a really good book. Recently, it's actually been a lot of talking to like LLMs and getting sort of this like God's eye view of different strategies and understanding where something might fall short because you don't have as much like no one has as much context as these LLMs for the sort of business development cases, and that's been actually really really useful to know what sort of like marketing schemes work well for these kind of folks. This is my customer base. This is the kind of product I'm trying to sell. Get these like overarching ideas and have them bring up points that you and your friends who are too close to the product might not see. You know, because you don't need it to be right. You just need it to bring up things that you weren't thinking about and
Yeah.
then start a conversation around it.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of like mentors, I did learn a lot from my internships, like where I worked at startups and sort of
Mhm.
seeing how they truly tested a product in the sense of not technically, but in the eyes of a consumer. Sometimes a
Mhm.
consumer doesn't know what they want. Sometimes you need to kind of bring it to them in a really shiny package and let them learn about it themselves. Like treat your consumer as someone smart and someone who will take the time to look into your product. Don't shove it down their throat. Don't like push it everywhere they go, but let them peel it back and understand the different layers to it. So, and it really depends on the product you're trying to sell. But yeah, definitely my internships were a big help. And then yeah, really just trial and error and sort of hitting your head against the wall and seeing what you did wrong that time and going again.
Yeah.
I think the biggest learnings we've had is about selling because all my buddies and I are software engineers. We come from that like very technical, aspect and making something look really good, but it's explaining that to someone and getting money out of their wallet. That's like when you think about it yourself, you're like you're not gonna pay for software for the most part. You find it
Uh-huh.
hard to,
Yeah.
and it's really trying to show them that value day to day to get them to pay for something.
Yeah.
That's a big one, learning how to sell, and that's where
Mm-hmm.
like we're still learning a lot.
So I guess talking about you and your software engineer friends who decided
Hmm.
to come together, I wonder what type of personality you need. Sorry, not that you need. What type of personality is well suited to pursue this type of startup idea, and how do you pick the right people to work with?
Yeah, yeah. I can tell you for sure you can't be super careful. Like you have to break stuff, you have to overpromise, you have to sort of go outside your comfort zone and, push yourself. I don't think you're gonna be a very successful startup if you stay in your comfort zone, sort of think like an employee of your company instead of like
Mm-hmm.
a someone pushing your company to the next limit.
Yeah.
Um,
That actually makes
s
me think a lot of these very smart people who go to these tech companies, they're just used to sort of succeeding. And
yeah,
I
yeah,
wonder if this why you don't see these really smart people on in the sense of like exam and stuff like that. Why they
yeah,
don't do these things on their own? Because if they're so smart, then they should see this opportunity and do this. And if they're like afraid to fail,
yeah,
so.
yeah. I think being afraid of failure is super bad. Like business is just like a string of failures until
Mhm.
you're one success, and then
Mhm.
you keep moving along. But also, it's people who can optimize for a criteria. In this space, you need to find your own criteria. There's no exam given to you. Like it may not be revenue that you're trying to optimize. It may be customer adoption. It may not clicks on your site. It may be recurring customers. So like
Mhm.
you need to find your own criteria. You need
Mhm.
to like set yourself up to know what to look for. It's not like here's the syllabus, you're gonna be tested on this in 6 months, go
Mhm.
over optimize. This
Mhm.
is this is like it's a whole different type of game, and you're competing against other companies who have most of the time more resources, like these bigger companies that you're competing against if you're a startup.
Mhm.
Like work around them. How do you differentiate yourself? It's way more creative thinking than I think our at least our education system in Trinidad kind of like
Mhm.
didn't prepare us for.
Mhm.
And then the things that you take for granted in a company, as someone who comes from a technical background, they matter a lot more than your technical
Yeah.
product.
Wait, can you tell us
Marketing.
some of them? I'm
Yeah,
curious
yeah,
for my
yeah.
own learning.
Yeah, so so like marketing, understanding your customer, getting to know their day to day, how to reach out to them, what's the form of communication that they empathize to most, they relate to most, how to sort of add pizzazz to your
Mhm.
to your product, how to differentiate yourself in a way that is memorable. Like
Mhm.
all these small little things when put together make a really good product story versus hey, we're just better than the other person in a very technical, easy to understand way, but that's not being singed into the mind of the customer as why you're like they should get your product.
Okay, so let's kind of like go back a little bit more into
Mhm.
Waterloo and what you studied there, and I guess this is where you met your friends who you are building these companies with. So maybe tell us what you and your friends studied first, like in particular, like what was the course or the
Yeah, yeah.
courses, and what was the structure of study? Because I know Waterloo has a different system than most universities. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, co-op programs like Waterloo are much more rare in the US and Europe. And a co-op program basically is university timeline where you have a lot more internships. So at Waterloo you have up to 6 internships, and you basically get no terms off, like summers off. It's just a mix of school term, work term, school term, work term, all the way until you graduate. So it's like 3 months of school. I'm sorry, 3 years of school, 2 years of work. So you
Mm-hmm.
finish your undergrad in 5 years, but you have 2 years of work experience. So you have a good amount of money in your pocket. You can pay off for loans, and it helps finding a job, whether it's a return offer from one of those internships or leverage from those return offers to get other offers. So at Waterloo, coming straight from Trinidad, I joined computer engineering. So it's in the engineering faculty. It's a mix of computer science and electrical engineering for the most part. It deals with very low level computer architecture, CPUs, microarchitecture, as well as programming and coding and whatnot. And then pretty heavily into circuits and like breadboard wiring and stuff like that in the first couple of years that I was there.
Oh, I didn't know you did that crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's why I left. I did
I
one
see.
semester of
Okay.
breadboard wiring and digital circuits. After doing a couple of internships, I realized that like what I was learning in school
Yeah.
was not directly relevant to what I was doing at work, and it
Mm-hmm.
was a lot harder and effort like intensive than I think it needed to be, especially for. But I think it is that way in Waterloo because engineering is such a like a cream of the crop. It's supposed to be such a hard degree that you can really be proud of, and then engineering in Canada is a like a protected job class. Like you
Okay, it's
to be
like
called an
doctors.
engineer. Yeah, yeah, yeah. To be called an engineer, you need to have an engineering degree and do like a exam afterwards, like a PN exam or whatever,
Oh, interesting.
to be called a professional engineer. Yeah.
Okay,
So
but
like,
you can get
there's
an
no
engineering
software
degree.
engineer. Yeah, you can get an
Sorry,
engineering degree. I
but
was
you're
gonna say
not
there
called
is
a
no.
professional.
Yeah, you're
Sorry.
not called a professional engineer.
Okay, got it, got it.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
were you gonna say about software engineer?
Yeah, so my title in the US was software engineer when I worked for Microsoft US. Then I moved to Canada recently and I work for Microsoft Canada, and my title is software developer because I can't call myself a software engineer in Canada because I don't have an engineering degree. Um,
Interesting.
yeah,
Wait, so you
that's
started
a
off with
fun
computer
fact.
engineering and then you switched to.
So then I switched to the computer science faculty, so the math and computer
Okay,
science faculty,
got it.
and I started doing statistics because I
Mm-hmm.
liked statistics from high school and liked my undergrad stats classes. So I went pretty heavily into stats and sort of that mathematical thinking. And I didn't want to do pure math. I felt it was too far away from my day to day, and I was kind of intrigued by the machine learning classes and artificial intelligence classes that were offered in the stats faculty.
Mm-hmm.
So I did statistics, and I tried to do a minor in computer science, but I was one course short, and I didn't
Mm-hmm.
want to stay an extra semester, so
Yeah,
I did a statistics degree, yeah, and then a bunch of CS courses,
I see.
computer science courses.
But just like you said that you felt like what you were learning was not what you needed in the job, but then you
Yeah.
did statistics and machine learning. Do you do that in your current job?
No, I don't in my current job, but it was where tech was kind of moving towards, as you can see now with like ML
Mm-hmm.
AI craze and the hype that's going
Yeah,
on.
yeah,
So I did think like I learned things there that are more relevant to my longer term career, maybe
yeah.
not immediately at Microsoft, but it gave me the flexibility. This is another big thing why I didn't like engineering. Engineering, like 95% of your courses are preset. Whereas in the math and CS faculty, I could have chosen electives and, have more area for discovery and growth in what I want to try, what I want to learn about, which I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
And that allowed me to, try different things in stats, try different things in computer science, taking AI courses, ML courses, advanced algorithms courses, stuff like that.
Yeah. Um, I wonder. So, I mean, you've always been someone who I know is like super smart. And just so the audience knows that Arjun and I went to the same high school, and sometimes he was 3 years below me. Yeah,
Yeah,
3 years. Yeah.
3 years. Yeah.
And sometimes, your parents asked me to tutor you. And actually, it's funny. First semester, I came back from MIT to Trinidad, and I was trying to do physics with you, and I was like, nothing you are currently tested on is challenging you. So we started to do the problems that I was given my first semester, and I just wonder how much you felt challenged when you went to university,
hmm
and if you yeah. So maybe tell me how much you felt challenged during university. So I guess in terms of Waterloo and like what was the competition like,
Yeah,
things
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
So I think for my first year at university, it was much on the easier side for me specifically because A levels in Trinidad prepares us at a much higher level. So, for example, advanced calculus, advanced linear algebra. We do a lot of my first year courses in A levels in Trinidad. So even a lot of my peers who came from the British system were also at like a big advantage
Mm-hmm.
compared to local Canadians and American students who didn't see these complex like differentiation, integration, and lineage. But we were like, very much versed in these, had major exams. So, and those were the bulk of your courses, those
Yeah.
core math courses. And the intro to programming was really the course I found that's where I spent most of my time on. But it was also very algorithmic, which I really liked. So I picked it up really quickly. I quickly started doing really well. And then after I had my first internship, I kind of realized, and like also talking to a lot of people, that your GPA doesn't matter as much when you're in tech. It's one
Mm-hmm.
line on your resume. Nobody cares about it after your first job for the most part. It's not something that's going to haunt you, compared to, I want to say, like medicine or
Mm-hmm.
like being in academia, where kind
Mm-hmm.
of these checkpoints you need to hit at every point to get to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
Here it's about like experience, technical skills. So I didn't feel the need to optimize my GPA. I always felt the need to like be around the 80%, 85%. That's where I felt comfortable at.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely slacked off a lot in my
Uh-huh.
first year.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes missing midterms to go see Sonia in MIT,
Uh-huh.
because I was just so confident in
Your
like making
ability
up the
to do
marks
the
in the
final.
final. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Especially for courses that, uh, if your grade was higher in the final, they would just take your grade in the final over the midterm or whatever.
Oh,
Um,
nice. Okay.
yes, I would like play those marking schemes to,
Yeah.
basically get it done in the final exam. But then when winter hit, so this is my probably second winter in Canada, tied with the extreme class load in engineering, it was not mentally draining where I feel like I couldn't understand the work. It was the effort required. So going into the labs, doing breadboards where I felt like I wasn't learning anything. I was just like not wiring something properly and then spending an hour trying to see a light bulb light up or a speaker play, and it wasn't adding much to my like toolkit. Probably patience more than anything, and
Yeah.
working with other people. But that part really really started to get to me. I felt like I was being tested and like being forced to do things that were not anywhere um, useful. I think for the most of the class, anyways, because all of them want to go into software engineering, but they're doing these things because for the most part they either couldn't get into like the software engineering degree or the CS degree because Waterloo is so competitive. And for me, I didn't know that I should have applied to computer science or I should apply to software engineering.
Yeah.
I was very naive in high school, never did coding before, so I was like, okay, computers,
Yeah.
engineering, like I've heard these two terms. These
Right.
are two terms, they sound good together. That's
Yeah.
probably what I want to do. And that was as much research as I did for applying to Waterloo.
Right.
But the workload is really what got to me. It wasn't mentally taxing in the sense of like not being able to understand, not being able to do good in exams, but
Yeah.
going day in and day out, going to 8:30 labs, getting up
Yeah.
in the cold winters,
Yeah.
the amount of classes. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
what really
That's
forced me to
uh-huh.
leave engineering.
What you're describing is why I decided to do theoretical physics instead of experimental. Also from these labs where I don't know, it's seems like the day to day is just it's not for me. That's the best way to say it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Doesn't get me excited. But I've had someone else on this podcast who said that she did experimental cosmology and she was like, I loved arts and crafts. So doing these type of circuit board, she's talking about wire bonding. It was very instant feedback for her.
Yeah.
And I think it might be similar to what software engineers say also, where they write a piece of code, they test it, it works, and it's like instant feedback. You just tell a computer what to do. If you tell it the right thing, it'll do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess let's talk about like why you picked this, because maybe we can go to talk a little bit about Trinidad growing up. I guess you and I similar in that we did something that we picked a major that people usually don't do in Trinidad. You're told to, I think for many people in many countries, it's sort of recommended that you should become one of three things: doctor, lawyer, or engineer, because they're generally considered safe, maybe safe income streams and stable jobs. But I guess did you have this idea going into university, and what happened that caused you to switch to something else?
Yeah, yeah. So to also, I think a third benefit of these jobs is status, which I think is a big thing where we come from. Like the societal status of your parents or extended family saying, "Oh, this guy's a doctor or lawyer or engineer or something."
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So for me, I was heavily influenced by my now wife Sanya, who I met at IMO. So she did computer science and she joined
Wait, say
university
what the
before.
IMO is.
Okay, so IMO is the International Math Olympiad, which is a competition where every country sends six high school students to compete at this math competition every year, and it's held in a different country every year. So I
Mm-hmm.
met her in 2015.
So you're a nerd. Okay.
Put shortly, yes,
Uh-huh.
yes,
Uh-huh.
math nerd specifically.
Okay.
Yeah, so she was 1 year ahead of me, and she got into MIT for computer science, and then that made me kind of like read into like tech, and because I had no, like our high school didn't offer computer science or anything similar to that at a high level or at a modern level, I want to say.
Yeah.
So her
Learning to
joining
code in
that,
Pascal.
yeah, great preparation for Microsoft. Yeah, so her joining MIT in tech kind of made me investigate more about it. What's the job opportunities are like, especially because I was going to be studying in Canada. So that kind of got me tied to, okay, do something in computers. It seems like that's where a good money is in the future. That's where it's a good, work-life balance, and there seems to be like a lot you can do from the ground up. It's a very easy field to break into in terms of like starting your own business compared to like, if you want to start a law firm or something, it's a lot harder. Or you want to open your own clinic, it's a lot harder. You need a lot of capital. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
software, it's kind of free to start something and then get the tools up and running. But anyways, so I knew I wanted to do something in computers, but then I was also tied to this engineering, medicine, or law kind of built into my mind
Yeah.
as you go through high school. Like this is what you're aiming for. And I
Yeah.
was
This is
honestly aiming
success.
for medicine. Yeah, yeah, I was aiming
Uh-huh.
for medicine during high school. I knew I didn't
Uh-huh.
want to live a life like that, but that's what I
Yeah.
was optimizing for. High
Uh-huh.
grades, good extracurriculars, stuff
Right.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started looking at the courses offered by these different universities, and I saw like, oh, computer engineering, that's computer science, but it's also the engineering that my parents want to see, or
Mm-hmm.
like, that I need the validation for to do something in engineering.
Yeah.
So that's why I
Wait,
applied for
did
computer
they
engineering.
actually want to see the engineering, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that
Yeah.
was a big deal. When I was gonna
Uh-huh.
leave engineering, my parents
Yeah.
were kind of worried, like, you're gonna
Yeah.
leave engineering for something
Yeah.
that doesn't have engineering in the title. You're just
For
gonna join the math
science?
faculty. Yeah, like,
Uh-huh.
what are you doing? You're
What
gonna be
science?
unemployed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a big thing. Like, you had to do an engineering degree.
Mm-hmm.
But then I
Mm-hmm.
started learning more from my peers, people higher in the university from Trinidad,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding that these recruiters and these big companies couldn't care less if your degree title had engineering or computer science or even like a math degree. It's about the experience, about how good you are in the interview, and what you can do day to day and perform. And I
Yeah.
always say it now, even to my like siblings, your degree and your GPA is one line in your
Mm-hmm.
one-page resume.
Yeah.
And I think the university name does a lot of lifting, but
Yeah.
not the GPA and whatnot. So,
Yeah.
anyways, I applied to computer engineering, got into there in Waterloo, and started and quickly realized it's not what I envisioned or hoped for.
Uh-huh. In computer engineering.
Yeah, in computer
And
engineering.
then you switched to CS after you kind of
Yeah,
ditched the parts of computer engineering that you didn't like
exactly.
and
Yeah,
went
yeah.
okay. Yeah, I think it's worth talking about this with different people, and especially you, this idea that your degree title is tied to your job. And
Mhm.
sometimes I wonder if this is just, sort of a North American thing, like US, Canada. I don't know how often it exists in other countries, but okay, I mean, it definitely exists. But I just want to say, like, I know it's not true for every country.
Mhm.
And so, especially for us growing up, how we look back now and say, like, the degree, it's very easy for us to say the degree doesn't matter.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like you can get, like me, you get like a physics degree and do something now in finance. And with you did this CS degree, which gives you this huge flexibility. And it doesn't matter if you're like a software, computer engineer or computer science, things like that. And I wonder, what type of advice would you give to someone in, for example, Trinidad? Also, like in Canada, different places. Like, do you think it's true in Trinidad still? That's one question.
Your degree doesn't. Well, I do think it gives you a leg up early in your career if you want to do something that your degree sort of easily ties into,
Yeah,
of course. But I don't think, especially in the modern day where the barrier to entry is kind of being broken down in almost every sector with these AI tools and the ease of learning anything, you know.
yeah,
Of course, in some fields you need certification. Like there's the bar, you need to pass these medical exams to
right.
actually be a certified clinician or whatnot. But in a lot of these other fields that if you have interest in, whether it's, selling a product or giving advice on something or like those, they're easy to learn and your degree shouldn't stop you from learning. I think that's a big thing. Like it shouldn't stop you from being tied to this one career field and you're closed off from everything else. It
Mm-hmm.
should empower you to have a baseline that you can always fall back on. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
how I see kind of your degree is like a checkpoint that you could always fall back onto and get into that career path that it was
Yeah.
kind of intended for. Not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily, but don't lose the ability to learn and expand your toolkit. But I think it is tough in Trinidad specifically where everything is tied to your degree. Like it's the final stage of academia where your life outside of academia starts for the vast majority of people,
Mm-hmm.
and it's sort of like that's the crown and jewel, of your like 15 years in academics. So
Mm-hmm.
you better choose something good, or you just screw up your whole life. But that's
Yeah.
that's not the case where mobility is so open. I want to say in North America especially.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, given this openness, what do you recommend someone study?
um.
Like, how should they make that thought?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I am gonna be biased towards the sciences and sort of understanding technology at a higher level because that's just where every field, like, doctors are using technology, lawyers are now using technology for information retrieval. So having that understanding as a good base, whether it's through a degree or some other form of study, whether it be like a diploma or something like less expensive. I do think that that provides such a great base for anything you want to do afterwards. So I do think it doesn't have to be computer science, but maybe something you like with a minor in computer information systems or IT or something to give you an edge in this modern, very highly technological world. And it's only going to get more so with like AI tools coming into play into all the different systems, how to spot, wrong data, how to understand these systems at a higher level.
That was literally
Um,
my next question. I was writing down, how do you think AI impacts what job I should pick next?
yeah, yeah.
Sorry, what's a.
So there is a lot of doom and gloom in the software engineering space because all these companies are trying to automate, our jobs and have these no-code solutions, straight from idea to platform to solution. But I do think they are overhyped right now without real results, and almost no company is making money off of AI yet. Like running these massive models are so expensive, and they're either free to the customer or you pay like a small $10-15 a month, which is not sustainable. Nvidia is the only company making money off of the AI hype so far,
Mm-hmm.
selling these GPUs. Um, but there are a lot of jobs that sadly are gonna be, much more concentrated. So I do think right now is a market for senior whatever in any field almost,
Mm-hmm.
because a senior with the right AI tools can do the work of 3-4 people now with
Yeah.
all this automation and all this help.
Yeah.
There's no need to ask, hey, can you find this file in this list of things? Can
Mm-hmm.
you like do some searching that requires sort of a human understanding of the thing? Now that with like semantic finding and like these contextual LLMs, you can do a lot of those menial tasks
Mm-hmm.
uh, on your own with more context being a senior person. It's sort of like having these low skilled but high context workers as the LLMs, and
Yeah.
you're bringing that orchestration to put them together. And sort of to tie in to our startup conversation earlier, I think this is where like startups can kind of undercut bigger companies. Like I don't
Mm-hmm.
need 10 employees. I need two of them with a subscription to GPT Pro or whatever,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
and let them run as fast as they can and empower them to not have any roadblocks and keep communication super efficient between them,
Yeah.
and let ChatGPT sort of, or whatever LLM, pick up the slack.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you forgot to do this, or this document doesn't contain this, or hey, summarize this thing that my manager wanted, or whatever. Those things really empower the smaller company, but at the same time, the smaller company has less employees. So there are jobs being lost, where that startup would have employed two technical writers, someone to
Yeah.
generate images. Now it's just one subscription to this suite of tools.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely everything you said seen with myself, where I write piece of code and I give it to it and it's like, can you fix this? And then it fixes it. And then I'm like, do you have any suggestions on how to refactor it? And then it gives me, and then, it's just...
Yeah. So I was
Yeah.
actually talking to a friend of mine recently about this, is the skill of writing clean code going to be necessary in the next
Yeah.
5 to 10 years?
Oh.
And we both kind of agreed that it's not, because
Okay.
these LLMs, and as they get better, will write cleaner code than any human engineer could.
Yeah.
But how to
Wait,
put
talk
them
about
together?
what clean code is for
Okay, yeah,
someone
for
who
sure.
doesn't know.
Yeah. No, that's a very niche thing. So, I want to say clean code is easy to understand. So, for example, if I wrote the code and I left the company and another engineer had to come see it, is it easy for them to understand and easy to read? The readability of code is a big one. For example, in code, you use variables to denote something, similar to math, like x is equal to this, but you would never name something x in code. You need to
Mm-hmm.
be descriptive so a human can understand it. So there should be like, height of something or price of something or time until. So that gives you an idea for it to be human readable. Then it needs to be modular. For example, let's say right now we need to support Chrome, so we're doing everything to Chrome. But in the future, we're like, okay, we need to support Safari as well. Well, if all this Chrome code is all over our entire code base, it's going to be really hard to now support Safari. So you want to make it really modular. So you break apart these into pieces that you can easily swap or add to. And then the last one is testability, that I think is a big one. So if you can write really nice code, but it's hard to test, and what I mean by that is, can I give it an input and then assert that the output is what I expect? If it's very hard to test, then it's not worth a lot to a company, because we don't know
Mm-hmm.
how it behaves in all the different scenarios.
Yeah.
So I want to say readability, modularity, testability. Those are like the main three
Yeah.
for clean code.
For clean. Yeah. And this is something that LLM will be able to do very easily. I mean, I see it
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
So I'm actually
Yeah, I
kind of
mean,
happy
yeah.
that I didn't learn how to code formally and just learn how to code on YouTube, because now I have the idea and I just put it in, and then
Yeah, you can say what you're missing and then let
Yeah.
ChatGPT fill it in. Yeah.
yeah.
And I think the skill that now is being like the differentiator is how can you orchestrate? Like
Mm-hmm.
if I tell you build YouTube, for example,
Yeah.
you need to break that down into such small tasks that you can tell GPT to do.
Yeah.
How well can you do that?
Yeah.
That's now the problem. It's not about code, a commenting system. It's about how do I break a commenting system down into small pieces. Okay, there needs to be post comments, edit comment, and an edit comment needs, whatever. And you keep breaking it down into these small subtasks that you can ask ChatGPT to do, and you put it back together.
Yeah.
And that sort of orchestration, and it's like process management in a different way, where it's not with people, it's with
Yeah.
yourself and an LLM assistant.
So what role do you see LLMs impacting your job, and how do you try to
So
keep up with it?
right now, it's impacting in a way that it's affecting execution speed and sort of impact. So there's a lot of engineers who refuse to use it because sometimes it's wrong,
Okay. Yeah.
So they won't use it at all. But that allows me to now write a lot more code than you, a lot cleaner code than you, because I'm
Yeah.
having it kind of check me often. So I'm now outpacing my colleagues.
Yeah.
If you're someone who's using it and using it well, in a
Yeah.
well integrated way, where you can spot when it's wrong, when you can write tests to make sure it's doing the correct thing,
Right.
then you're outpacing your colleagues. And you're out.
Mhm.
And if a company's doing this, where 50% of their company is using these LLM tools, they're
Yeah.
reaching to the market faster than the other company.
Yeah.
So you can see like these small gains at the local employee level is big gains to the company.
Yeah.
So like at Microsoft specifically, I mean, they're heavily invested into OpenAI. They're pushing these tools in every single product we have. So GitHub has Copilot. Microsoft Windows itself has Copilot. Teams, all these things has Copilot. So for example, when I'm ready to write my performance review, I'm asking Copilot, hey, what did I work on in the last 6 months? Itemize these things. Like, help me think. I'm writing an email to my manager. I'm writing an email to a PM about a very technical document. Break it down in a way that will help them understand.
Yeah.
So all these little time savings, it like adds up monumentally, especially with so many nodes of connections in a company, you know, that it is a big efficiency gain, but I don't see as much full-fledged automation yet. So I don't think anyone's job in my team, for example, is directly affected or going to be gone. It's just that it's allowing you to see which people are using it, which people aren't. Yeah.
I guess that makes me think, maybe you somewhat agree. I see LLMs as kind of like calculators when before we didn't have calculators, they invented a calculator, and now we should use this tool to do arithmetic even quicker, and I can beat my friends who don't use a calculator. But then I also have this question of, to what extent should I to be integrating large language models into my life, in the sense that, you know, as we're saying, if you don't use it, you'll get left behind. So how much should I be using it? Should I really focus on trying to, I mean, I use it for my code. I don't use this Copilot thing, which now that you're telling me, it's like, maybe I should use it. I use it for recipes. Where else should I? Yeah, so basically, to what extent should I be trying to use it and get better at using it? Because you're saying also it's not about, everyone has access to this tool. So it's about how to use the tool correctly, and how do you recommend learning it so that you don't get left behind?
Yeah.
For what it's worth, I was also resistant to using it. And then my coworker showed me something, and I was like, man, yeah.
This is so much time savings.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think you need to understand that, like, the shortcomings of it to begin with. For example, if you're giving it massive documents, it's not going to hold the context of that massive document really well. There's hallucinations for things that are badly asked or too vague, you know. If you're giving it too many things to connect to, it's going to give you garbage or something not reliable that you might want to Google or fact check. But when it's very localized, and this is where I like to use it, if it's like a 2-page document where I want to get the big points, or it's an email that I want a draft of that I can clean up to my tone, or I want to critique on, that's where like I really like using GPT. And then the specific code trained GPT for software engineering are very powerful. And then having them closer and closer to the development cycle. For example, in my code editor, there is like GPT helping me. So it's learning my style of coding and what I'm trying to write, and it's kind of autofilling, this smart autofill, you know.
Wait, so this is Copilot? That's what you're saying? Copilot.
Yeah. So this is Copilot in
VS
like your
Code?
local ID. Yeah, in VS Code.
Okay.
Or there's another one called Find that's pretty good.
Okay. I'm asking this so I can use it.
Yeah, I'm plugging all the Microsoft products.
Yeah.
But it also changed the style that I code, which was something I noticed when I first started coding at Microsoft last year, or year and a half ago, to now. It's like now I code as if someone's watching me all the time. What that means is I use a lot of pseudocode and comments, and it's like I'm explaining to Copilot what I'm trying to do so that it knows how to fill in the blanks. So before I would write the complex stuff first, because that was the exciting part, and then the boilerplate outside stuff out like last, because I just want to get that over with last. But now I write the boilerplate stuff. I use much better names. I'm really trying to get Copilot to understand what I'm trying to do. And it usually fills in the blanks for me really, really well. And it's because I'm sort of empowering the LLM to understand what I'm doing. You know, I'm using terms it knows. I'm using a very basic language to kind of break down my functions even smaller. And it's making me write better code in doing this because I'm explaining it to someone. And it makes like code generation so much better, and makes writing like tests so much easier.
Sold. I'm gonna start using this tomorrow. Seriously. I've been using Sublime without Copilot but I've just been copy and pasting my code into
Into
ChatGPT
an
and
app.
then
Yeah, yeah.
and then asking it to like fix and then pasting it back in.
I mean, the main
uh,
benefit is that you can add entire files as context. So it can see what you're trying to integrate to and be like, oh, well, your
yeah,
API or your function call is this.
yeah,
Let's clean it up a little bit, you know?
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
sweet. I don't want to get left behind, so. I guess this is a good opportunity to ask also, what do you think high school students should be using
Yeah.
ChatGPT or some kind of large language model for? And
Yeah, this is
how do you see that helping them? And should they be using it? I think they should be using it, but it's kind of
uh,
dangerous also because yeah, maybe we should add how should this is a little tricky because we were just talking about before we started that growing up in Trinidad, we come from a culture where it's pass exam. Someone gives you a task or a metric, and your goal is to optimize that metric. And I think that is actually a little dangerous with
yeah,
a
with
large language
LLMs.
model. Yeah. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? You can also give some more background into what I was
Yeah, yeah.
saying.
So yeah, in Trinidad there is this progression to the next sort of exam that there's a clear syllabus for. So you start in kindergarten, then there's primary school, and then at the end of primary school, which is grade 5, you write this entrance exam, which is standard across the country, that you do to get into a high school. So based on your score on this, you go into a certain high school of your choice. And then in that high school, for the first 5 years, you're preparing for this thing called CXE, which is a Caribbean standard exam. And that's just to secure your place for grade 11 and 12 or Form 6 in Trinidad. And then there you're preparing for this thing called CAPE, which is a standard Caribbean exam. Again, that used to be the GCSEs, which is a British standard exam. And now a lot of tertiary schools in um, North America and Europe consider CAPE very strongly because it's a very difficult standard exam that's easy to compare across students. So you can see that it's just getting to that next step and checking
Mm-hmm.
that box and getting
Mm-hmm.
to the next one. And the syllabus is very clear from the beginning. And I do think that in this context, LLMs are way more detrimental than they are beneficial
Mm-hmm.
because I can see it leading to a lot of grade inflation
Mm-hmm.
during a semester. So let's
Mm-hmm.
say I have assignments, I have quizzes, I'm doing so good on them, but because of these standard exams, my parents don't know that I need help. My teacher doesn't know that I need help because ChatGPT is currently taking this class. But now when I'm in the standard exam that is worth 100% of my 5 years of work for CXE, it's me alone in there in this exam hall,
Uh-huh.
and I haven't done these things before.
Yeah.
I've just been copy pasting into ChatGPT,
Yeah.
and I think there will be a lot of parents getting caught off guard, a lot of teachers getting caught off guard. Oh, why didn't we catch this earlier? You were doing so well. You were a grade A student. Now you're getting a C when it
Yeah.
when it finally matters.
Yeah.
And Trinidad is especially brutal because 100% of your grade for the most part is that final exam.
Mm-hmm.
Because of these standard exams. But on the flip side, I don't think students should not use it either. It should be sort of like this empowerment tool to help you, discuss problems, help you get better, the smaller things that, need refining, help
Mm-hmm.
you present your problems better, and help you understand your problems better. So, for example, when I need to ask a question to ChatGPT, it first requires me to sort of understand the problem and how to ask it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's similar to discussing with someone else. If you don't know your problem well, you're not gonna have a useful discussion about it.
Yeah.
So it does benefit some skills, but in the harsh exam conditions of Trinidad, I do think this will cause a lot of unexpected failures and a lot of under preparation for these exams.
Mm-hmm.
So it's either the school system has to change to do these regular, hard exams where it's just you and a paper, or the education needs to change where um,
They
there's more
accept.
projects. No, I don't
Uh-huh.
think you should bring laptops into the
Uh-huh.
the
Into
exam
the
room, but
exam. Yeah.
or the exam should be more of projects and more sophisticated, creative thinking. Assessments instead of these sort of regurgitative, algorithmic, rote learning style exams.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's going to be a very tough problem for education, I think.
Yeah.
with LLMs.
So I think one thing in particular is that a student who is curious and wants to learn can actually become even better, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah.
you're like free from specific textbooks, you're free from not having a great teacher, or
Mm-hmm.
it's like really this is better than the internet, right? The
Yeah,
internet
yeah.
things are scattered, but now you can talk to it and tell it what you know and ask it to explain it to you at this level, and you get everything. But one issue is that not everyone is motivated to learn. Most people are motivated to just pass an exam. But one thing with you in particular, I know sort of going to school with you is that you were motivated to learn. And I
Mm-hmm.
wonder what made you motivated to learn, and how would you motivate someone else to learn and not just pass an exam?
Yeah. I think my motivation to learn to begin came from my mom's way of teaching stuff, which is being able to solve a problem from first principles almost, which is um, and the style of teaching is, hey, let's learn this principle or this law or something, and you can try 4 or 5 problems, and then you're kind of, okay, I think I understand it. I can solve problems like this. Okay, here's a problem you've never seen that applies this principle in a weird way. So it requires you to take this thing that you just learned and sort of mangle it a bit and really understand where it's coming from and apply it to the situation you've never seen. And this is like such a, I think MIT does this pretty well too, which is exam is kind of like a learning experience where you you get this principle applied in a way you haven't seen before, or using things that you didn't think were connected. So I do want to say, deep down, I still just wanted to pass the exam and beat everyone else. Like
Mm-hmm.
that was like the competition. But I realized that learning to pass the exam is less efficient than learning for learning's sake. So in trying to beat everyone else and get the highest grade, I sort of realized that if I just learn these things deeply
Yeah.
and in a way that even if I forget the formula, I could use intuition and this base level of principles to build it back up. That would allow me to get much higher marks, especially on the bonus questions or like these so-called like final questions that everyone find difficult, you know. Those are
Mm-hmm.
my favorite kind of questions because they
Uh-huh.
were not formulaic and they were
Yeah.
like, how well do you really understand what you know about electromagnetism or whatever it is, you know?
Uh-huh.
And I
Uh-huh.
remember those were the kind of questions you brought like when you were tutoring me. It was those kind of like, yeah, you learned all this stuff and how current works in this very closed systematic way.
Yeah.
We're gonna open it up now and we're gonna see how
Mm-hmm.
much you like understand really, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um yeah, and like that drive to um it is optimizing for the syllabus, but in a very sort of roundabout way
Uh-huh.
that lets you prepare for anything, you know.
Yeah.
And then that sort of became the driving force of, hey, I want to like understand things for what they really are and not just learn the quadratic formula, but understand its proof and
Yeah.
understand where it came from, and that led me down like the path of eventually doing the International Math Olympiad, and you know, even like now in tech, sort of peeking behind the curtain to see why are we doing it this way, knowing
Mm-hmm.
when to ask questions, when
Yeah.
to get down to the lower principles, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess talking more about, since this kind of you said this desire, or like opening up this idea of learning first principles is simpler.
Hmm.
This came from your mom, and I wonder how much of your success, and you think success in general, especially people our age, comes from having a good background and you know what I mean, like support from your parents, someone telling
Yeah, yeah.
you what the right thing to do.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah.
No, I definitely think it's a big, like it's a massive deal, like financially, emotionally, like being able to feel supported to try something crazy, you know. Like just for me doing tech, like it was a very unknown thing in like the Trinidad culture at the time. Like, oh, why you're not doing engineering? Are you sure you want to do computers? Like a lot of it, like people thought it was just like IT, not like
Can you
software
fix my
engineering.
computer?
Yeah, 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 exactly.
Uh-huh.
But they were still very supportive, and they kind of knew that they could trust me to make a decision to that you know I could openly communicate with them, that I wasn't being like shunned or whatever. But definitely in like formative years, no, my mom being a math teacher was really great in the sense of like I could have very high level discussions back and forth with like how to prove something, or like I don't understand this, like why did the teacher teach it like this, or
Mm-hmm.
like those conversations it's hard for a student to have in a big classroom,
Yeah.
like especially for I guess a higher achiever who wants to kind of again peek behind the curtain. A teacher
Yeah.
doesn't have that throughput, that like bandwidth to do that, because
Uh-huh.
they need to cater to everyone in the class, and they can't just cater to your curiosity. They need to
Yeah.
make sure that the weakest student is getting up to par and understanding in a way that works for them. So
Mm-hmm.
that allowed me to express curiosity, and then as well having other family members who are like deeply into academia.
Mm-hmm.
And another one is just being in our high school, where you're around a lot of like-minded folks who do want to learn from first principles and
Mm-hmm.
trying to like push you in like true friendly competition,
Mm-hmm.
you get higher scores or solve the bonus questions, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and then as well as like my dad is a big like inspiration, because he had no like very little support in the sense of like academics,
Mm-hmm.
and he went from like nothing to like the highest he could in the field that he chose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um so like yeah, having those people around you is definitely massive, and then having people close to me that are ahead of me like you and other like alumni from presentation who showed that this upbringing in pres and this kind of like brotherhood can push you
Mm-hmm.
so far in North America, because I still always felt like, yes, I was pretty smart, but in a very small pond, in this
Mm-hmm.
very small country of Trinidad. But then you see like we're actually, very competent away
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely sort of growing up, at least for me, I always felt like I should think about Trinidad only, and it felt very like don't think it's not common to think about the big picture,
Yeah.
and I wanted to think about the big picture, and actually people kind of were like, you're crazy,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
like everyone is just going to go to University of the West Indies, regardless of what you do. And yeah, so but yeah, it's through seeing people ahead of you get to those positions makes you believe that it's not crazy.
Yeah, yeah,
um
yeah. And I think with the scholarship system in Trinidad too, it like definitely allowed people who could explore those opportunities too.
mhm.
Like now you like financially empowered a bit to go and try, where before you might as gone to University of West Indies and settled for something that you thought was good enough for you.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
now you can expand your horizons and try something.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about LLMs, and I wonder, firstly, how do you think things like these LLMs like ChatGPT, and I guess what is the new one right now?
Oh yeah, there's Llama, there's Gemini, there's Cloud.
Yeah, and I guess now that everybody is using it, especially as a student in university, how do you distinguish yourself as a student now, where everybody has access to ChatGPT, apart from just exams, especially when it's take-home exams and all these things, and yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
as an individual, how do you start to distinguish yourself?
Yeah, I mean, even at the high school level, I think the critical thinking that is present in math, especially and applied
Mhm.
mathematics,
Mhm.
will be a major differentiator, because even at a like advanced high school level, ChatGPT gets really tied up, and these advanced models get pretty tied up in math, and it's hard to fake advanced math critical thinking skills using ChatGPT and stuff.
Mhm.
And I even think for university entrance differentiators, that they will underweight things like English and literature, and these things that can be faked with ChatGPT to just straight up copy and paste
Mhm.
to these mathematical, more rigorous exams that require like a deeper level of thinking that's more transferable to a lot of these engineering, science, medicine degrees. Because I think it really just comes back into that style of thinking is so useful for most degrees.
Yeah.
Being able to take a simple principle and apply it in ways in a very creative and critical way.
Yeah. Actually, that actually goes core to the what we were talking about in high school, learning the underlying principles. And I think this is my impression, and
Hmm.
from things that I've heard, is that I guess maybe since you have this stats background, also correct me, but this thing is just learning from the past and regurgitating. This is exactly what a lot of exams are, or at least the type of exams that we grew up taking, and where so it can somewhat limited to do well when it has seen it before in a regurgitating sense. And the thing that's harder for it to do is to solve a problem from first principles. So the problems that it hasn't seen before, but you need the first principle understanding to solve it. It might fail in that. Is that true?
Totally agree with that. I mean, it's the same reason why these LLMs are horrible at chess. It's because it's hard to apply these first principles to a game that has virtually infinite, scenarios. There's only that much you can remember and apply. What chess requires is more this taking in what you know about the different pieces and different positions and applying them in real time. And that's sort of like where the deep mathematical questions that require creativity will help differentiate someone who has been using this in a lot of their other areas of study and math, where the current state of LLMs are nowhere near ready to handle these type of questions. And I do think that it's going to push the importance and the weight of math in all these differentiating steps in life, whether it's high school, university, research graduate. Like your math skills are going to come more to the forefront now.
Yeah.
Anyone can write a dissertation at a high level now with ChatGPT, breaking it down and using all this fancy terminology that you need. But when it comes down to actually doing the research day to day or understanding these results at a high level, it's not going to help that much.
Right. It makes me think even more like the fact that you realize that learning something from first principles was more efficient to sort of succeed in the exams. I think even now, the students who sort of regurgitate, they learn to regurgitate, they're going to suffer even more in the long term now.
Yeah. Because I think that style of learning stays with you as an employee or like someone trying to build your own company. That's like the way you learn to learn, right? And then when GPT can do what you're doing at a much better efficiency and performant way, it's going to regurgitate better than you at anything. You need a way to differentiate yourself and a way to pick up patterns and apply things in creative ways that it just hasn't seen before.
Yeah. Wait, just in case some people don't know, I don't know if you actually have the stats for this, but I was thinking about kind of contextualizing how this thing is so much better than you, in the sense that it can absorb so much more data than you can. And then it has the ability, well, actually, that's one aspect. I guess maybe you can tell me the ability of it to retrieve the data better. Is that like the distinct, these differences with the human brain? And I mean, we're still better than computers, but computers can retrieve the information better. Is that it?
It's not only retrieve information better, but you can think about like GPT having a graph of every corpus it's ever seen and trained on and finding connections between all of them. So our brain is limited in the bandwidth that it can look at because of like various limitations, but ChatGPT can pull from a massive amount of recollection. So like a really simple example is a doctor trying to diagnose something given one scan, and he's seen about he or she has seen 50 scans in their life from textbooks, and they're trying to differentiate based on these scans that they've seen in these textbooks. But an LLM or image recognition model has seen millions, everyone that's been uploaded, and it can find the patterns using complex matrix manipulation and all these fancy algorithms in the background much quicker than you and I could, and at a much higher level of confidence compared to what it's seen before, that this is benign or malignant or whatever. So its ability to find connecting patterns and the recollection mass that it has is untouchable by a normal regular human.
I just really wanted to drive down the point that if this is the thing that you continue to try to
optimize,
it's just really a bad decision. But okay, now talking about the impact of LLMs on companies and startups, like right now in the US, if you could put machine learning or
Yeah.
AI on your startup, it's funding. And I heard if you could put AI and crypto together, it's even more funding.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I just wonder, how do I think about the value that these startups are contributing in terms of AI, and how, like, what are they actually doing? Are they good startups? How does large language models help you create a
Yeah, yeah,
startup?
yeah. Um, so I want to say the majority of startups now are adding like a wrapper to a lot of these LLMs where it's either more contextualized on something specific to their customers, or it's using an existing connection and giving you this like LLM capability. I think it's very short-sighted in the sense that every time OpenAI releases a new version of GPT, it kills a lot of startups because they were doing what OpenAI is now offering for free. For example, there was a company that lets you upload a PDF, and what it did was use image recognition to paste the PDF into ChatGPT. So under the scenes, it was just a PDF reader for OpenAI for their ChatGPT. But
Yeah,
then the next version came out, and hey, we can read images now, and it's free.
yeah.
So that entire business model fell apart. I think it was like tens of millions of dollars of VC funding,
Wow.
um, because they had so many connections, and now it's
Mhm.
free, and you can get a license that much cheaper because there's no need for a middleman. So I think the idea of bringing in LLMs into the startup, you already need a good product and good integrations and very seamless. What's the word? Like, it's not shoving AI into the face of the customer. It's providing value in a real way, and then having AI be an empowering feature. But it shouldn't be the core feature, in my opinion, for now. I think
Mhm.
that's a way more sustainable model as we're maneuvering the information that OpenAI has. We don't know
Yeah.
what their next model can do.
Yeah.
If you're building something that their next model can do, you're not gonna win against these behemoths.
Right.
Their branding is too good. They're on every device. Everyone
Mhm.
has tried it. I think ChatGPT was the fastest growing service to ever exist. So you want to build something that already provides value in a very assured way. And I think there's a lot of space to innovate in these archaic sort of technological sectors, whether it's like education or health or the medical sector or, these places that are so resistant to move.
Yeah.
But now with smaller startups, because of AI tools and so much cost savings and more security and all these little tidbits that add up to great customer value,
Mhm.
now you can provide real value and have AI as this nice to have feature on top of it. But
Mhm.
it is the shiny thing that will get people to look at it, and will get funding.
Mhm.
But it is a much more long-term sustainable business plan compared to, hey, we can read a PDF or we can do something and then give it to ChatGPT, which I don't think in the long term will make it'll make some people rich from getting VC funding and leaving, but if
Right.
you want to build something long term, I don't see it panning out too well.
So yeah, so don't think too much about AI as a core. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That makes me think, do you think because of how much processing power and data training, energy, these types of things, that sort of the ability of a startup to create a LLM competitor, is it just impossible to compete against these big people?
Uh,
Should I
y-
just accept that I'm not going to make a better ChatGPT and I should use something else and then let it be empowered by ChatGPT? Oh,
yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I do think for the average person, or even like someone who's not like a PhD in artificial intelligence or has really, really strong technical abilities to, either they like find like a eureka moment, like a insane way to train these things at a cheaper amount, or like something that's really groundbreaking. Because these companies have the funding and they're backed by behemoths, like Microsoft will burn as much money as it needs to get OpenAI to get to the next model. Like
Mm-hmm.
we're not gonna like no one else, like that's the
Mm-hmm.
second, I think the first biggest company in the world right now or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
backing these AI companies, and then the competition is Google, who has all your data, Meta, who has even more of your data, and like the accessibility of the data and the funding that they have from other projects is insane to compete with. And yes, there are smaller companies like Anthropic, I think. I can't remember the other one, that are competing. But I do think in the long term, those companies will struggle to make money because of Microsoft's ability to integrate it into paying customers. Like Copilot's
Mm-hmm.
not making money. Copilot in Word is making money. Copilot
Mm-hmm.
in PowerPoint is making money. Again, like these companies are showing that AI isn't the product to be sold. It's a feature on an existing, very entrenched, like
Yeah.
write your emails faster or make your slides better or they look nicer. It's
Yeah.
not, here's this app called Copilot. It's just this thing on top of everything. And I think those are the only companies right now that can make money from these really expensive to run LLMs and AI models. But yeah, for me and you, we're not going to make a better ChatGPT and
Uh-huh.
create a startup around it. Yeah,
Right.
unless you have a few billion laying around that you want to sort of throw away.
Okay, you have so many achievements that it's hard to get to all of them. But one of the last ones I wanted to talk about was the MIT hackathon.
Yeah.
So you won the MIT hackathon,
Well, our
right?
team
And
did, yeah.
your team, yeah, okay, your team did. So I think this is like a huge accomplishment, right? Like I mean, especially as we're talking about kid in Trinidad, went to Waterloo, this whole path that we talked about. And then you came to MIT and did this hackathon with a team. And you guys, like, I mean, your team had MIT students in it also. But I'm just saying, like, you were part of this team that now beat this
Yeah,
super,
yeah.
well, what is okay, since I went there, I'm like, I
You don't
kind
want to
of
call
don't think.
yourself elite.
No, no, no. I was gonna say I don't think they're all super, but from the outside world, it's like, whoa,
Yeah,
you
yeah, well,
beat like this MIT, this. You
yeah,
came to
yeah,
you showed up in their house and beat them. I think that's pretty cool. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. Like, first of all, maybe
yeah,
what
yeah.
is a hackathon?
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
was gonna explain first. So,
yeah.
hackathon is like this very big or like fun events in the tech world where a lot of people have ideas and there's just not time to do it or there's not a space that you feel um, like pushes you to build something. So there's these either company hackathons, university hackathons, events, just like a career fair or something, and they want you to build something from scratch. So you have like 48 hours, sometimes a week, sometimes it's longer, but usually they're very short. So it's high intense. You're not sleeping, you're drinking coffee, and there's a lot of companies there to give you the tools you need at virtually no cost to let you build these things. So for
Wait,
example,
what kind of tools? Because I've only seen Red Bull.
for example, Amazon was there at the MIT hackathon, and they were giving out cloud credits. So you could
Oh, right,
use
right.
Amazon Web Services for free for that weekend. You had like 300 credits. There were other companies like say you wanted identity management, which is like user control, like login and stuff. There were other startups there like here, use ours. It's for free. Just log
Mm-hmm.
in and customers are ready to sign up.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a bunch of other companies like that. Like if you wanted whatever it is, security, anything, there's startups, big companies there willing to give you credits because it's marketing for them, and these
Yeah.
are brilliant minds that they want to help shape and get them accustomed to their tools.
And get them
But the
to
whole
join the
point is to,
company.
yeah, exactly. But the whole point is to build something in a short amount of time and then demo it and sort of sell it to the panel of judges. And MIT Hackathon was a bit unique in the sense that they had streams. So before the event, usually you have an idea that you're going to the event to do. But at MIT, they have like different topics. So for example, it could be fintech. So you're given a random draw that day. Okay, your team is fintech, build something in fintech, or you're in biotech, build something in biotech, or you're in whatever. And we got developer tools, so we had to build something for developers or like tooling for like the dev tools itself. So that's very unique in the sense that you don't know what type of idea you even need to start with. So this is a hackathon where you need ideation on the spot, kind of, and then you start building. So it's a bit more difficult in that sense. And I only kind of the motivation for going to the hackathon in the first place was getting a free ticket to see Sonia in MIT at the time, which was because they
Uh-huh.
paid for and the plane ticket and stuff, and that's when me and Sonia were apart, and she was like, "Let's do the hackathon. They'll pay for this," and we were like, "Okay, yeah, I'll come and do it."
Uh-huh.
And so it was me and another friend from Waterloo, and then two MIT students, Sonia and one of her buddies. Um, and yeah, the hackathon was I think 36 hours or 48 hours. And our idea was to do with labeling data. So that's when like ML and a lot of these classes were being big into a lot of these internships were big into machine learning, AI, and if you know about those stuff, you know that the heart of it requires really good quality data. Doesn't matter how good your models are or your architecture. If you don't have good data to train on, then you're just going to output garbage. Input garbage, output garbage. There's
Mhm.
no systematic learning. So we built a tool that sort of helps do labeling and helps you be consistent in your labeling, so you're not
Mhm.
accidentally labeling something as something else and confusing or making the
Mhm.
data lower quality.
Mhm.
And yeah, that was the whole idea, and we, hashed together some working backend, put together front end in a couple hours, and then, pitched that to the judges, and yeah, we won the stream of dev tools, and then
Yeah.
we won the entire thing because of the impact that had. I think it was really big at the time because of the kind of hype that ML and AI was happening at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did the idea go? Did it,
Uh,
anyone use it?
So there,
Yeah.
when we started looking into it more, it became the kind of tool where companies were not willing to pay for this because they would outsource all their data labeling to Asia or these low-cost countries,
Yeah.
and then do formatting of it in North America.
Oh,
So it's a
okay,
lot
I
of
see.
you can't compete with the low cost of labor.
Right.
Um, that's
I
like
see.
that's like the heart of the problem. Even though it provides value and whatnot,
Yeah.
it's hard to compete with offshoring and the gains of doing that.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense. So, what impact did winning the hackathon have on your like immediate career in terms of like did people see this as like a big thing? Do you put on your resume still?
Yeah, yeah. So I put it on my resume up until I think my Microsoft job. I'm
Mhm.
not sure if I will keep it for when I'm looking for a next job, but it definitely got noticed, and recruiters asked me about it on calls, and usually my on-site at Microsoft, actually, where they had the culture question, the soft skills question, they kind
Yeah.
of digged into how I was working at the hackathon, what were some
Yeah.
like caveats, what were some, tough cuts you had to make, because hackathons are a good place where you need to do trade-offs.
Yeah.
There's limited time. You can't build your MVP. You need to show something to the judges. How do you do that? So it definitely is something that got me noticed, and we really didn't expect to to win the hackathon, but it was a crazy experience.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think I should have gone to more hackathons as a university student. I didn't pay
Uh-huh.
attention to them as much. I thought they were just like a fad and like connections, like you just go to
To
talk
network.
to network. But
Yeah.
I do think if you have ideas and you want the space to build them and see them come to life, it's a
Mhm.
good space to do that, and it is fun for the most part.
Mhm. Mhm. So I think as you mentioned in your next job, I guess you just like alluded to it, and I wanted to ask you if you were to do something next,
hmm
what would it be?
Yeah, I've been trying to figure that out myself too. I do think I would. So I guess now it's a good time to talk about the downsides of big tech, so we can kind of transition easier into what I would look into next.
Uh-huh.
So I did say that, process management, people management become ever more important as you move up.
Yeah.
But those are the things that don't excite you day to
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Like preparing for meetings, being in meetings a lot,
Mhm.
dealing with reorgs of big things, changing priorities, shifting goals. There's a lot of churn, and these big companies have a lot of changing parts, layoffs. There's a lot of things that suck your morale
Mhm.
when you're trying to, put your head down and execute. And those things burn you out for sure.
Yeah.
Like all my friends who are in big tech now are trying to either a startup to have revenue and mentally checked out at work, or that's the downside of big tech.
Mhm.
If you're not exactly or directly passionate about what you're doing, that passion will get used out, with all these bureaucratic issues. So my next, or what I want to do in my next place, is stay closer to the product of that I'll be working on. So find a place with more stability, with more long-term vision. Those are things that you don't ask as a entry-level software engineer.
Mhm.
You're
Mhm.
happy to work on anything almost if they're paying the right amount.
Yeah.
Um, but now you're thinking about your day-to-day, and like trade-off of more money if you're like, at least like for me personally, we're like not buying, expensive. They don't have a really lavish lifestyle. It's not worth, having a couple extra dollars in the bank account, but hating your day to day.
Mm-hmm.
Like you want to go somewhere with really good leadership, in the sense of like they have a clear vision, they know what your product is going to look at, they know how to get there, or a broad idea, and like they have passion, you know.
Mm-hmm.
In these big corporations, these like VPs and directors, sometimes they don't have passion for their products. They're using this product as a stepping stone to get to the next level, like to get to
Uh-huh.
C-suite. They're
Yeah.
limited budget, even in these big companies, right? Money's not a problem, but they're competing against each other. Maybe let's say Word needs more money than PowerPoint or something. So hey, let's build this feature on Word so we get the funding that we need for my director to get promoted. But
Yeah.
they don't care about that feature. The
Right.
underlying feature, it's just a stepping stone to moving up the corporate ladder. So I'm definitely not going to look at big tech as closely. Sometimes you
Mm-hmm.
get lucky and you'll find what I like to call a startup in a big tech. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, maybe when the Copilot team was just starting off in Microsoft, like they get to break stuff and move really quickly. They're immediately tied to Microsoft standards, because
Mm-hmm.
they need to move quickly, but they have the funding of Microsoft. So they're
Mm-hmm.
like a nice little startup within a big company. But I do want to look for a place where the leadership is passionate about the products, and I'm closer to the product lifecycle and being able to say more about the products. This was like another thing that really bothered me about Microsoft, or bothers me to this day, is software engineers are very late in the product discussions.
Uh-huh.
So you have a lot of like top down ordering.
Yeah.
Director wants this, PMs or product managers say should be done like this.
Yeah.
Let's meet with everyone. Okay, we signed off. Give it
Yeah.
off to the engineering team.
Right.
We can't do this like this.
Uh-huh.
It's too late in the cycle,
Mm-hmm.
especially in like the organization I work for, and that causes so much churn and miscommunication and like, all the big corporation problems.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, small to medium, uh, clear ideas about their product, their features. I think that's the big ones.
So definitely small to medium
Yeah.
and still some kind of software engineering. You're not going to explore something else.
I don't think right now. I think right now my extra time will be focused on like taking startups to higher revenue, more
Yeah.
sustainable revenue, expanding in sort of like the revenue streams that I own more of, instead of like being an employee.
Uh-huh.
I think now that I have this big name on my resume, it's easier to explore and, be shot down, because I can always, have that as a checkpoint to try to get back into these bigger companies. And now I feel more empowered, like having, savings and whatnot to
Yeah.
try to do
Take
these
more risk.
things. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to do that as a new grad. Say no to the 150K salary or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and put your head down and build your own thing.
Yeah.
But it's easier now that you work there and you realize it may not be worth it long term. You're
Yeah.
happy you did it. You took some learnings,
Yeah.
and now you can, try something full force, and
Right.
you have some capital to help you.
Yeah. So to wrap up, you've learned all these things along the way, and I'm wondering if you could kind of go back to, let's say, graduating high school at that
Hmm.
stage. What would you do differently moving forward?
Graduating high school,
Yeah,
I
right
I
after
would have
graduating.
yeah
Yeah.
I would research programs more, like the courses you learned, like not just the degree name and what the university says. Like every degree sounds great because the university is trying to sell you on each of them, but actually looking at the courses that you're going to learn, reading about like testimonials from students, or reaching out to people in that university to get reactions to different things and how they felt about what they majored in. I definitely didn't do any outreach that I really should have done, because I knew a lot of people in these universities and these degrees that I were considering. And then I think to other students too, it's to prepare yourself for a big jump in workload that I don't think a lot of people are ready for. That's why so many people, like I knew personally, dropped out in first year or second year
Of
is
school,
of
of
university.
university. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like the jump between most high schools, whether in Trinidad or Canada or America, to that first year of university can be like insurmountable, for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like one way to do that is to, yes, enjoy the summer and stuff, but maybe start prepping like academically for some of these more like brutal courses, like calculus,
Mm-hmm.
lineal. Just like refresh the basic things you learned in high school,
Mm-hmm.
um, and kind of mentally prepare for that. It's gonna
Mm-hmm.
be intense, especially if you're not used to these advanced calculus and lineal. And then do some coding. Like I would have done some coding for sure. Like
Yeah.
I only coded as like an 18-year-old, 19-year-old in university, and it
Mm-hmm.
was a whole different style of thinking. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like you can express yourself in a very algorithmic way, but you need to now put it in a programmatic syntax and all these things I just told you about, like readability, modularity, testability, like those matter so much in like real world development and doing any sort of project or small like dumb like tic-tac-toe or just anything to get your hands dirty, see what building software is like if you want to go into this field. I think that would have been so helpful to me in my first year rather than stumbling through it in my class the first time. Because a lot of the professors in these classes assume you have coding experience,
Yeah.
as most North American high schools do.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Caribbean, it's either like super archaic or none at all.
Uh-huh.
So you're gonna be behind like from the get-go. So it's better to take that summer. You have no immediate deadlines or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
just like dabble in some coding or any sort of YouTube courses, any small thing. Use ChatGPT. Get
Mm-hmm.
get some coding skills. Yeah.
Yeah. That reminds me, even after my maybe my second year in physics, I realized that, oh, actually my first semester I realized that I had to do C++, like data analysis for physics stuff, and it was just this huge disconnect between what I thought it was and what it is, and like, yeah, we need to harness computers, kind of like the calculator analogy. It's like,
Yeah.
now you need to use computers, and how do you talk to computers with code? Um, and I felt like disadvantaged because everyone, as you said, learns to code in high school, and even now, like now that I do it so often, I kind of forget that I really just didn't learn any of this at all. And I mean, in high school, even in my sort of training, because I did physics and math, I kind of just learned it by myself. But I feel like everybody should learn to code. And I
Yeah.
feel like
Yeah.
it would be great in high school if everybody learned it as a sort of math, English,
Yeah.
coding.
It should be like a core. A
Yeah.
core. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And I think with all the tools now, it's definitely great and easier to pick up. Like you said, you don't need a great teacher anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, awesome. I think I've kept you on for long enough, but this has been super useful. I feel like I've learned a lot about even how to use large language models better, how to think about starting a company if I ever have an idea, use large language models
Yeah.
to kind of help me figure out that product market fit. Yeah, so thanks so much for being on the podcast, Arjun. Super useful, super insightful.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me. It was fun. I hope people learn from this, and yeah, this was great.
Thanks.